This video, I just want to share some reflections on superheroes and guns and action movies. I don't really watch movies, right now. I just train, spend time with the family. I've been playing video games, mainly just the Call of Duty, but I don't really watch many movies. I don't really have that desire to, but my kids and my wife were watching Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle movie today, and I briefly saw the movie for like 10 minutes, and I just have some thoughts on it. It's just the direction of Hollywood and action movies and all these superhero movies, no matter if it's like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles or Spider-Man, Batman, the Avengers, X-Men. I mean, the list goes on and on. But a lot of these movies, these action movies, are based around comic books and comic book heroes. The Hulk and all that stuff. Iron Man. And these movies are making millions and millions of dollars. Now, when you think about it, all these things have changed. The days of Bruce Lee are of the past, like way of the past. Like, now, to make a modern movie, you gotta think about it. Like, you gotta think, why isn't a gun involved? Like, why aren't guns involved? I mean, guns are just everywhere. So if you're making an action movie, like, how could you make an action movie without having guns getting involved in the movie? Like, you can't just, I mean, they've already come up with so many different ideas, and like, why there's these storylines and these plots. Like, you have to put in consideration, like, every single movie, you got to think about why are these people fighting? Like, what are they fighting about? And if they are fighting, how come there's not guns involved? Like, all modern movies are gonna have guns, and in order to get away, or like, in order to survive these guns, the people have to have some type of supernatural, superhuman powers. That's what only makes sense. So then, like, somebody like a Wolverine, when you shoot him, he regenerates. He's not just like a regular human being. And then that allows the storyline to keep going on. Same thing with the Matrix. Like, there has to be some type of reason of why these people cannot just get killed by regular, by guns. They could somehow dodge bullets, or when you shoot them, it doesn't do anything to them. And then when it comes to comic book heroes, there's a reason of why they can do that, because they are superhuman. And then it's a fantasy movie, and that's why the police and all these people that have guns can't stop these people. And it fits along with the storyline, and it makes sense. It's based off of fantasy, and because of that, Superman could fly, Spider-Man could use his webs to stop the bullets from hitting him or penetrating him. Wolverine could just regenerate. Cyclops could use the beams coming from his eyes to kill people. Iron Man could just, the bullets just don't affect them. There has to be a reason behind it. Now, if these people are not superhuman, and you got like a Bruce Lee or a Jet Li or a Tony Jaa running around, and they're fighting all these people and beating up all these people, the question is, if it's a modern movie, then why are there not any guns? It's still the thing that's being asked is, why are there not guns? And then the ideas just come to an end, and then the whole genre of so-called martial art movies, it just becomes a joke, because you could only come up with so many storylines on why these people are fighting and why there are not guns involved. And if there are guns involved, then how come, they're not getting shot and killed during this altercation? Like real movies dealing with real people and real gun violence are movies like Godfather and Boys in the Hood, Menace to Society, Juice. Like, those are movies dealing with real people with real gun violence, and that's not martial arts. And then you got these action comic book movies where people got supernatural powers, and then gunfire just doesn't affect them, doesn't stop them. But the reason why is because it's based off of a fantasy where, imagine if this superhuman person was actually living, this is what he would be able to do, and he cannot be stopped by guns. But then those days of Bruce Lee and unarmed combat with no weapons and all that other stuff is just, those are long gone. I mean, it's just it doesn't exist anymore. You know what I mean? It just doesn't. And that's what I see, is it's just technology has just made martial arts very much outdated in the world of film. So you're not gonna see martial art movies being produced. I mean, even movies that have been produced not too long ago that are really great martial art movies, like Fearless and Hero, House of Flying Daggers. Like Hero and House of Flying Daggers, they used a lot of CGI, and like House of Flying Daggers, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, Hero, they used like a lot of fantasy as well. I think Fearless might have been one of the few movies that didn't really use much fantasy or, special effects. But it's just very evident that in modern days right now, martial art movies, they're just no longer relevant in today's society. Technology has just made them all outdated. And even when Bruce Lee was living, he told somebody that he's gonna have to get into something else other than martial arts, because the interest in it is gonna pass. That's how it goes, and a lot of this stuff, these so-called martial art movies are very, it's very childish, because you got these people fighting over whatever they're fighting about. But then the question always is, like, how come somebody doesn't have a gun? And then everything just doesn't make sense anymore. But when you got a movie like Matrix, for example, where they're explaining like why Neo is able to dodge bullets and things like that, and why their minds are being programmed where they get to learn things really quick. Like, they're not real human beings, but they're portraying a storyline based off of some type of fantasy, and then you get involved in it, and then you enjoy the movie. It's not a real movie, but you still appreciate the movie for what it is. But nowadays, you can't really truly make a martial art movie, because if you just put a little common sense into it, you just be like, wait, this doesn't make sense. There's all these fights going on, but then there's no guns at all. It just doesn't make sense. And then when you do bring in the reality of guns, then it just gets really, really gruesome and violent and dirty and just, something that's not even artful. It's just, and then you just have to come up with, they had to come up with something else. Well, how can we have somebody give a reason of why somebody cannot just get shot and killed just like everybody else? And then they had to come up with something. Okay, this person's a superhero, so that's why you can't just shoot and kill him. That's why, he could be surrounded by cops and then people, everybody's shooting him, but nothing happens. And then there has to be a reason, and that's why people are gravitating towards like comic book heroes and fantasy, because just seeing real people dying by gun violence is just not something that's just very entertaining. You don't want the superhero you don't want the hero in the movie to just die. You want him to live. So they had to come up with more and more reasons on why this person is not dying. In a world filled with guns, where in real life the person could easily die by just one gunshot. And there has to be a reasoning, and that's why they keep turning towards comic books to provide that reasoning, to have the superpowers. But the days of like real martial arts without guns, they've passed away a long time ago. Ever since the invention of the firearms and the bettering of technology, it's not just a 6-shot revolver anymore. I mean, it's like you got really high quality semi-automatics and rifles and shotguns and all sorts of different guns. It's just essentially what it boils down to is, how can you possibly have an action movie without guns in modern day? Even movies of the past before the invention of guns, a lot of these war movies, like Gladiator, for example, would use weapons like swords and sticks and staffs and things like that, and bow and arrows. I mean, this whole thing about the unarmed combat just becomes less and less relevant, even in film, because you just always question, like, where the hell are the guns? Why are these people fighting? And they're constantly fighting, but then there's never any guns involved. So I mean, that's just what it got me to think about. And it just goes back to what I was saying about earlier, about how martial arts is not even, it's not even needed in film anymore. It's not even relevant. So it's become more of like almost like an antique thing where people practice it, because they love to practice it, and it's for themselves, and they do it just because they like it. But in this world that we live in, it's become even more and more difficult to make money off of it, because you can't even use it in film anymore. So then where else are you gonna use it now? Because even out there in the streets, a lot of times it's gun violence, and then in the movies it's all about the guns. So martial arts is not used in the movies, is not used on the streets. So then when is it used? You know? Like, it's just something that people, it's like they just practice it because they love to, and it's not even about the money. I mean, just think about it like this. It's like swords. You know, swords is a part of the martial arts too. And there could be some people that are really great at using swords. But where are they going to use that skill? Like, they can't carry swords out there on the streets. And in movies, when do they need to use a sword? In a movie. You know, that's going to be very rare. And if they do need somebody to use a sword in a movie, why would they need to hire you just because you're good at it? They could just have anybody use the sword. They don't need to have an expert swordsman to use a sword in a movie. So you're not going to get hired to play a role in a movie just because you're good at using the sword. You can't even use the sword out there in the streets. So where can you make, how can you even make money just because you're good at using the sword? Or even gain any type of recognition or attention. You know what I mean? Like, that's what is happening, not just is happening, has happened to the martial arts. A lot of great martial artists are just irrelevant, in Hollywood and even on the streets. It's like who cares? You've been training in unarmed combat for 30, 50 years or whatever. Somebody just shoots and kills you, no problem. Right? So, I mean, that's what it got me to think about. Just look at how much our movies have changed through these years. I mean, I'm like 34 years old. Through my time living, the movies have changed so much. And with that change, it has made martial arts even less and less relevant. Because you look at back in Bruce's time, 1970s, martial arts was a new thing. And then later on, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles of the 1980s, they were like real martial artists that were wearing turtle costumes, doing like real martial art moves in a costume. But now, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, these are computerized turtles that are just superhuman because of the computers. They don't need real martial artists to play these mutant turtles. They just need people to just speak well and whatever, act well, while they use the computer to do all the things that they need to be done. But it's not even really many martial art moves. It's just a lot of guns being used. So just look at how things have changed from the Bruce Lee with no costume on. Well, first they put him in a costume with the Green Hornet. They put a mask on him. And then he was able to make movies without the mask on. And then after he dies, you got movies like the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles where they put the martial artist in a turtle costume. And then now there's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, but then it's a computerized turtle. I mean, look at how things have changed so much. And how martial arts is no longer needed. It hasn't been needed in Hollywood for the longest. So, martial arts is not really needed in Hollywood. It's not needed on the streets. So where is martial arts needed? It's something that's not really needed. it's just something that people that love it, they practice it, and it's a small group of people. It's not a large group of people. It's never going to be something where it's going to make as much money as like Avatar or any of these action movies. It's always going to be like a small group of people that have appreciation for the martial arts. It's never going to be like, oh, you know, as popular as Batman or Spider-Man. It's always going to be a very small segment of the population that appreciates the martial arts. I'd say maybe just 1% of the population might appreciate the martial arts. But everybody else is all into the technology and superheroes and fantasy and all of that. You know, in my eyes, it's almost like Bruce Lee was the one who introduced the martial arts, and then it just died with him. And then from then on, it's been very much watered down and turned into something that's no longer pure in my eyes, you know. But that's some reflections that I had with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.